Imagine a world where winter doesn't just bring cold, but hunger, sickness, and death. No heating, no supermarkets, no warm jackets, only fire, faith, and hope of survival. This was the terror of winter in the Middle Ages. We complain when the Wi-Fi's down or the heater's gone for a couple of hours. In medieval times, one brutal winter would wipe out entire villages. How in the world did regular people make it through the cold, dark ages of the Middle Ages? The Middle Ages, roughly from the 5th to the 15th century, was an age of knights, castles, and cathedrals. Yet behind all this glitter of royal pride and shimmer of swords, there stretched a far grimmer struggle: the fight against winter. The season of winter for medieval peasants was anything but romantic. There were no snowy landscapes and cozy firesides. It was a period of fear, for food store ran low, livestock perished, and roads became impassable, to add to which was that bitter cold, which could seep into your bones to remind you just how fragile life really was. Today we step back in time to see how people made it or didn't make it. To the savage winters of the Middle Ages, the harshness of medieval winters. The climate in Europe during the Middle Ages was unstable. Scholars talk commonly of two epochs: medieval warm period around 950 to 1250 AD, and the Little Ice Age, which lasted for about 300 years, around 1300 to 1850 AD. In the warm period, winters were still deadly, but just about survivable. And yet creep in the Little Ice Age, Earth's temperatures would fall, harvests would fail, and winters grow longer, darker, and crueler. Imagine living in a small village. There's no electricity, not even modern medicine, and your survival depends entirely on what you manage to grow in the summer and autumn. Heaven helps you if you couldn't prepare enough, because then winter could very well be your death sentence. Food. The struggle against hunger. The greatest enemy of winter was not always the cold, but hunger. Storage and preservation. People in the Middle Ages leaned much on food that kept fresh, mainly root vegetables like turnips and parsnips. And usually, cabbages were stored in cool, dark cellars. They loaded their diet with rye, barley, and wheat, since these are grain. Yet these they also commonly found to be ruined either by rats or else by dampness. Meat was a rare luxury. Usually, it was salted, smoked, or dried to last through winter. The peasant diet. Common folk, fare oft was dull and plain. The main dish of each day was pottage, thick soup made up of whatever vegetables were at hand, sometimes with added bacon bits or dried peas in it. Bread, coarse and dark, fills belts but gives little strength. The hunger months. By February and March, stores were running dangerously low. This period came to be known as the Hungry Gap. Starvation was a most probable condition of humanity at this time, with some chronicles recording people eating dogs and cats or bark from trees to stay alive. Famine strikes. In particularly harsh winters, such as during the Great Famine of 1315 to 1317, people were led by desperation to purported acts of cannibalism across Europe. Chronicles write parents abandoning children, villages left empty, clothing, dressing for survival. Without using today's insulated coats or modern fabrics, how did folks in medieval times protect themselves against the biting cold? Wool was life. Almost every layer was woolen: tunics, cloaks, hoods, leggings. Linen was worn beneath for comfort, but wool was the shield against frost. Fur for the wealthy. Nobles lined their cloaks with fur from fox, rabbit, or squirrel. Peasants might line garments with sheepskin if they were lucky. Layer upon layer. Clothes were worn to rags, huddling at night with family and livestock for warmth. Shoes were a weak spot. Leather shoes get wet very fast in snow or slush. Feet get frozen, and then they get sick. Shelter. Homes against the cold medieval houses were not built for comfort. Peasant cottages, in most cases They were one-room houses with a roof made out of thatch and wattle and daub walls. The floor was typically just plain earth. A central hearth would try to make the place warm, but expels so much smoke into the house, it never goes out, but lingers inside, choking the lungs of its occupants. Windows small, sometimes covered with oiled cloth rather than with glass. Drafts leak in at every crack, keeping warm. A single bed, usually with the animals inside the cottage, sharing their body heat as well. Straw-filled mattresses covered in woolen blankets. Castles and nobility. Even castles were cold. Vast stone walls held the chill, and fireplaces hardly dented the gloom of rooms as big as barns. Tapestry hung over the walls cut down drafts, yet past most winters the wealthy shivered. Health, winter's silent killers. There was more than hunger and cold in this winter. There was disease, respiratory illnesses, chronic coughing, lung infections, and early deaths would be as common as they are today. Weakened immunity. Malnutrition during this hungry gap period leaves people open to fevers, influenza, and dysentery. The plagues return. Cold winters sometimes slowed plague outbreaks, but weakened populations were always at risk when spring came. Medicine was primitive. Doctors prescribed herbal remedies, garlic for coughs, honey for wounds, or charms against illness. Feast days as relief. Christmas, Epiphany, and Candlemas broke the monotony of the cold season. The humblest of people still tried to lay up something fine, a goose or a jug of ale, for those feasts. Work and daily life in winter. While farming slowed, life didn't stop. Craftsmen worked indoors to spin wool, weaving, mending tools, brewing ale. The children would bring in wood and water, and there ain't much worse than seeing a kid slog through snow with no shoes on his feet. Nobles hunted in winter. People had something to eat and were entertained, while peasants collected brushwood to keep their fires burning. Winter was a season of stories, singing, and community. All around the fire by night came stories of saints and monsters, of dragons and heroes whose heads had been found through the ice on the pond, in the woods where boys went each Halloween. Unexpected survival tricks. Some other less-known ways to survive included beer and ale, much safer to drink than water, which was usually spoilt. Even little children could take weak ale. Ice houses. Affluent manors kept ice from frozen streams in holes in the ground, covered with hay, to keep meat good until spring. Communal ovens. Towns at times had shared bread stoves, which not only cooked food, but also gave heat to sit near. The mental battle. Winter survival was not just physical, but psychological. The darkness unending, hunger, fear of death, these pressed much. Songs and games and festivals gave bits of joy. For some, faith kept despair from coming near. For others, it did not. Suicide, though seldom written of, was spoken of in the hardest times. Closing reflections. How did people survive winters in the Middle Ages? With preparation, with community, with fire, and with an unyielding will to endure. But survival was never guaranteed. Every winter was a gamble, and every spring that followed was a triumph. Today, when we raise the thermostat or buy fresh fruits in January, we should remember, to our ancestors, winter was not a season to enjoy, but to battle to survive. Winter in the Middle Ages was not a season to battle, it was a battle to survive. End of trying one's luck, faith, and endurance against winter in the Middle Ages. Next time you feel the cold outside, think of those who lived so many centuries ago, when warmth was a treasure, and food hope, and every winter night a fight for life.